So Alain and Steve, thank you for being here.
Yeah,
Great to see you, Jasper.
So Alain, I guess we could start with you, Alain. Could you introduce yourself to the viewers and give us your background?
Yes, so I'm one of the co-founders of Prismo Metals. I'm also the CEO of the company. I have a financial and corporate background, so I'm on the capital market side of the company, helping raise money. I did the deal with Vizsla a couple of years ago, and hopefully more corporate deals in the making here.
Perfect. Then you, Steve, could you tell us about introduce yourself?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Jasper. I'm not one of the co-founders of the company. I'm a latecomer. I've been with the company now for about 8 months, and very happy to be here as the president of the company. I'm a geologist by background. I've spent most of my career doing exploration, but I worked for a mid-sized producer developer for 24 years. And so I had a lot of experience with permitting, community relations, and so on. So I've had a fairly widespread training ground, and I think that this is a natural fit for me being in this position.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, since our first interview was released in September, I mean, the share price is down 65%. You have a 4 million Canadian market cap, and drilling has not started at Hot Breccia. So, can you tell us what has happened over the past 5 months?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So, when we spoke in September, and then shortly thereafter, our stock hit a 52-week high of 28 cents. And it was at the time where Steve and I were on our efforts to raise the necessary capital to start drilling at Hot Breccia, which is phase one would be 5,000 meters. And I'll let Steve explain what that would do for us and what 5,000 how 5,000 meters would be, what it would consist of. And then in October we had the June private placement at 17 cents. The shares became free trading, and then that's the first time that the stock retraced and brought us back to about the same level as it was back in June, 17 cents. And so that made the effort to raise the capital a little bit more tricky. And we thought we were there just before Christmas, and the orders were not quite as solidified as we thought. And then we were, then it was Christmas, and then when we came back after New Year's, Steve and I and the rest of the team sat down and started looking at everything strategically, and kind of refined the path forward. And we announced this week complete sort of update on all the projects. And two things came out of that analysis. One is that we terminated the option agreement for Los Pavitos, which is a gold prospect in Sonora State. We love the project. We think it has a lot of merits, but the carrying costs are just too large. I mean, it was a 5,300 hectare property, so it's large, and the costs just to sit on it are quite high. The other thing came out of our discussion is the strategic focus of Prismo Metals remains unchanged, and that means that we are out there talking to folks about the first phase of drilling and how to finance that. And as we indicated in our news release of a few days ago, it's kind of a twofold approach. We continue to talk to investors, but we've kind of ramped up our effort talking to strategics. I'll turn it over to Steve here to remind people who all of the players are in our area, and all the big boys are there. And then he can also touch upon what I was saying earlier, which is what are we going to do what are we going to do when we find the capital and solidify the funding for a 5,000 meter drilling campaign at our Hot Breccia copper prospect in Arizona.
Yeah, thanks, Alain. We talked about how the markets have changed over the last few months. What hasn't changed is the fact that we have one of the most attractive copper exploration plays globally. I mean, Hot Breccia is a project that is sitting in the heart of the Arizona copper belt. It's one of the most prolific copper belts on the face of the planet. It's surrounded by truly world-class deposits. Several of the deposits around us have been proven to have, many billions of pounds of total contained copper. And of course, the one that we really are attracted to in terms of an analog is Resolution, which is 40 kilometers to the northwest of us. It's one of the greatest discoveries that's ever been made in our business. The top of the deposit is 1.2 kilometers down. The bottom is 2 kilometers down. But it was well worth the search because it's, 1.5 billion tons plus of over 1.5% copper. So it's a giant and it's extremely high grade. And we feel that the geologic setting of Resolution is very similar to the geologic setting that we have at Hot Breccia. The big difference being that our prospective horizon starts 400 meters below surface, not 1.2 kilometers down. So this is, just a project that is begging to be drilled. We've done all of the preliminary work that needs to be done. We've been out mapping and sampling on surface. We've done a deep-looking geophysical survey that's found a very large conductor sitting at depth below where we have all these surface indicators that there's a big system lurking at depth. So we have all those factors lining up. And on top of all that, this is a great time to go to work in the U.S. because of all the political and other factors going on right now. Having a good copper exploration project in the U.S. is right where you want to be. So this is a good opportunity for us to raise the funds and get that drill turning out in the field.
Let's talk a little bit about that financing in the well, because as I said, it was very clear that some of the participants in that financing had dumped the shares. Do you know who participated? Who were the main participants of that financing? But it was 1 million Canadians. It was not a too significant, especially at that time, not a too significant financing for you.
Yes. So I think we had 42 different subscribers to the June 2024 placement, which, as you mentioned, was just a little bit over $1 million at 17 cents. Mainly high net worth individual, people who are very knowledgeable about junior mining. And I would say that about 60% of it came from Europe and would have been new shareholders. Now, who sold? I can't tell you. I don't know. I don't have visibility on that. But certainly in the way that the stock came off from its high back to around the financing price at very high volume for a few days, then I think it's easy for us to conclude that a lot of people took profits.
The raise that you were announced in December, I mean, were you confident that, because I think it was the interval, right? You didn't need to reach 3 million. You could reach 2.25 million and still bring that in, or did you actually have to get up to 3 million?
That's a good question. And the answer is we want to do 3 million because we do want to do 5,000 meters. We think it's the right thing for the company, for the shareholders. And Steve, you might want to explain that, right? We've had a lot of, and that might be interesting for your listeners, right? So what I mean by that is, so as a corporate team with all of the technical people, we say what makes sense in terms of the first phase of drilling, and then you come to an answer, and then you get to a price, and that's what we were out to finance last year. When we came back after the holidays and sat down and reviewed all of that and went through the exercise again, we convinced ourselves that the right thing for the company and the right thing for our shareholders is this 5,000 meters. And you might want to talk about that. I know you're passionate about it, Steve, and rightly so.
Well, I am passionate about it. I mean, this is a project that I've been waiting to have an exploration project like this come along for a long time. And now that we have the opportunity to explore it, I want to make sure that we do it properly. And we examined the reality that the market support wasn't there for the full $3 million financing earlier, and said, well, should we go out and raise part of the funds and get some of the drilling done and then hope that we hit and that we can go back and do it? And after thinking about that a lot, my conclusion was that really raises the risk for the project to go out. And I mean, we established as a technical team that the first pass of drilling should be at least 5,000 meters of drilling. And so that's what we're hoping to finance with the 3 million Canadian financing, was to drill 5,000 meters. If we go out with the opportunity to drill 1,500 or 2,000 meters, yeah, that's attractive. But what if we don't see what we want in that first drill hole or two? Then where are we at? And I think that we need to have the 5,000 meters to make sure that we get down into the hydrothermal system, that we get enough hits in there that we can actually see the vectors that are going to point us in the direction of the heart of the system where we're going to hit those highest grade results, and we can go on to another phase of drilling after that. So, that's where we stand. Options are always out there for us to, assess in current market conditions, but that's certainly our plan A, would be to make sure that we have the funding to do the 5,000 meters.
What is the cost difference between a 3,000 meter program and a 5,000 meter program? Just direct exploration cost and assaying and that.
It's proportional. So if you went out to drill 3,000 meters, it would be 3/5 of a 5,000 meter program, and so we can do the math on whatever meterage you want to hit, but it's going to cost us 3 million Canadian to go out and do the 5,000 meters.
3 million, but isn't it lower than that? Because that's, or is that is actually 3 million to get the drilling and assaying done, or is that including G&A and other stuff that? If we just look at the drilling and the exploration and all the other associated costs.
That's the all-in cost. So that includes everything from making sure that we support. And our G&A, by the way, is very low. So that's not a big component of this. For instance, when we're out there drilling, my wages will, I plan to be out on the drill a lot. And so, I'll be one of the technical team. But that cost also includes supportive work. So, for instance, when we drill a first hole and get down into a hydrothermal system that appears to have a lot of metal in it, I'm going to be calling up a geophysical contractor and making sure that we get downhole geophysics done. And, once we drill, we're going to have to do the assaying. So all those costs get included in that price.
I think you're right in that. Drilling 2,000-3,000 meters really decrease the chance of success.
The other thing I want to say on that point, Jasper, is think about it this way, right? So if we drill the first hole and it's eye-catching to retail investors and investors in general, and the stock goes crazy, then that's that would be an easy scenario where we can go and raise more money. Now we can do 5,000 meters and not necessarily get an eye-catching hole for retail investors, but we could gain enough information for the majors who are focused on geology specifically. And we can gain enough information to get them at the table and really interested. See what I'm saying? So it might be a couple holes that disappoint retail investors, but that get Rio Tinto, Freeport, name them, they're all in the area, really keen about partnering with us because we will have gained all of that geological knowledge. And you can really only do that if you have enough data. So, one hole's not going to cut it, 2 holes probably not going to cut it. So the phase one, as Steve has described it, is to gain enough geological understanding to get the knowledge that we need to plan the other phase and see how we're going to finance that. Everybody wants a hole that catches on the imagination of retail investors. We all want that, but you got to plan for not getting it, but gaining enough information to be able to make a compelling pitch to the more sophisticated investors after the first phase of drilling.
How long would it take to drill 5,000 meters?
Well, that's a good question. Deep holes are not for the faint of heart. And the deeper you go, the slower the progress is. So it depends. We've set our target for the first program is to drill our holes anywhere from 1,000 meters to 1,500 meters deep. And if we're drilling 1,500 meters, I would expect that each drill hole would take roughly a month. So it's going to take a while to get this project done.
So you drilled Palos Verdes, but it went slower and you only finished 2 holes, totaling 600 meters. What happened at Palos Verdes?
Palos Verdes was hampered by some of the local conditions. And, first of all, we were able to only have 1 shift a day. We were drilling strictly on day shift. There was no night shift. And there were actually some days the drill was shut down completely. So there were some issues in the area that prevented us from carrying out the program in the manner that we wanted. And then we got to the end of the funding that we had allotted for that. So our drilling was more expensive than it was budgeted for, and so we cut off the drilling at a certain point just before the Christmas holidays were coming in, and we haven't been able to resume. We will once we get additional funding.
What was the purpose of the 2 holes, if you could remind the viewers?
Well,
maybe Steve, you want to maybe let's take a step back, right, and say that the let's say that where we're at with Palos Verdes is not to drill 2 holes, but is I think it's up to 10 holes, but a lot of it depends on. I mean, all of it depends on funding, but it might be good to take a step back and just remind the viewers here what Palos Verdes is at, and what the phase of drilling that we started and that we will continue later on this year. What's that all about?
Yeah, so the Palos Verdes project is in the Panuco district. That's become quite famous because of the work that our neighbors, Vizsla Silver, have been able to accomplish down there, and they've really established it as a bonanza grade district with very, very high grade silver mineralization with a substantial amount of gold accompanying it. And we are definitely part of that district. Very strikingly similar intercepts on our property as those on our neighbors. So it's part of the same mineralized system. And we've been able to establish the vein on our property, the Palos Verdes vein, which actually has an short adit. It's probably only 30 or 40 meters in length on the property, but it's well exposed, the vein in the underground system there. And we've got probably 6,500 meters of drilling or so on that vein so far. And we've really been able to establish the high-grade nature of this vein, but we were restricted in being able to explore it to depth because of the boundary of the property with our neighbors to the south, Vizsla Silver. And we've got a good working relationship with that company, and they've actually largely funded the exploration in the last couple of programs. And we've actually got a technical committee that is comprised of our chief exploration officer, their VP of exploration, and Peter McGaw, who's a well-known expert in the area. And so this collaborative relationship worked in our advantage in that we were able to get Vizsla to go out and permit the drill pads on their property so that we could drill deeper at the targets on our property. And what we wanted to do is establish the down dip extension of the vein as it sits on our property. And that was the real purpose of the program. The second purpose of the program was there's a north-south fault on the property. On the east side of that fault, we can still see the structure, but the vein isn't there on surface. And that's not unusual. We weren't too panicked by that because that's the same situation that allowed the discovery of one of the major veins that Vizsla has on their ground. They had the exact same situation. So what we needed to do was drill deeper on that. So that was going to be happening in the second and third phase of the program, was stepping over to the east side of that fault and drilling deeper over there.
The 2 holes that you drilled, what was they were each 300 meters down hole, I think. What were the purpose of those?
They were on the west side of the fault, so they were trying to find the down dip extension of the Palos Verdes vein that had already been established.
And when do you expect to receive the assays?
Well, we haven't, as I said, we're looking for more funding for the project there, and once we have the funding in place, we'll be able to make the payment to the lab and get those results. So they've already been sent to the lab. We just need to receive the assays.
How much does it cost to do the assays?
I don't know what the outstanding bill is off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
I think what you'll see, Jasper, is that it's I go back to let's say retail investors like to look at one hole and versus another hole, and I get that, and I'm the same way on other stocks that I own. I hope everybody hits a big hole and I can get my money made quickly, but we don't look at the world that way inside the company. And I think what you're going to see, we don't have the assets, but do things in order to systematically advance the project. I think what the guys were seeing visually keeps, giving us the information that we want to see, the information that we need, and as Steve said, I think this project deserves to continue to be drilled, and so our priority now is on Hot Breccia. But if we, I keep saying the word if, using the word if, when we put the funding in place for Hot Breccia, that should also trigger some financing for Palos Verdes, and when keep drilling there. And I want to remind your viewers that Vizsla has a right of first refusal on that property. They've got their hands full on the west side of the districts. I think it's not a secret that it's not necessarily a priority for them. But as they keep progressing their plans towards production on the west side, having the prospective ground that we have, especially since the geological system that's at Palos Verdes is not restricted to, the legal boundary of our concessions, but geologically speaking, it spreads on their property on, two sides, and maybe it dips down on the third side. So it's fair to say that at some point this project will belong to Vizsla Silver.
But you don't actually know what you got in your drill results at Palos Verdes?
I was just going to comment that, from a technical perspective, we can't comment on what the geologists, obviously the geologists are able to see the drill core, but without releasing the results, we can't really comment on what was intercepted in those drill holes. And I don't think that would be to anybody's advantage. This project, as Alain was describing it, the fate of the project is going to be, we know that there's a vein there. We know it's high grade. It's a matter of finding out how extensive it is. And the fate of the program the project isn't going to hinge on one or two drill holes. And so we don't feel that the motivation is really there to try and make sure that we get these two sets of assays or results from these two holes out. We need to get the funding in place to continue on with the program.
Sorry, let me go back
to
what Steve said. So in 2023, we had a phase of drilling, and it was the first time we drilled on the east side of the fault, and then we got the assays back then, and the geologists, were around the table and said, well, what does that mean? Why are we seeing what we're seeing versus the west side of the fault? And so the technical committee, which is comprised of the VPX of Vizsla, Craig Gibson, our chief exploration officer, and Peter McGaw was an advisor to Prismo and a large shareholder. They looked at this and said, well, in order to be able to understand what we're seeing, we need to do certain work on surface. And that was based on the experience that Vizsla had gained on the west side of the district. So that's what was going on internally at Prismo. Externally, people were saying, well, I want to see the results. I want to see the results. It's like, well, we don't understand the results yet ourselves. Why would we do that? And then we went out and we did the geological work that was recommended by the committee. And based on that, we had all of the technical team had finally gained a good understanding of what was going on the east side of the fault. And so when we announced the results, which was the assays from the drill holes, plus all of the other work layered on top of the experience that had been gained by Vizsla, then we were able to put out a meaningful news release. And based on all of that, we were able to define the phase of drilling that we started with the first two holes, which will be extended later on this year as we get the funding. So I completely understand the fascination of investors for, assay results for drill hole to drill hole. I completely get it. Steve and I kind of, don't look at it that way internally. We never did. We never will. and I know it frustrates some of our shareholders, frustrates some of my friends who are large shareholders, but at the end of the day, they do understand that our job is to put out news that's meaningful and instructive, and that guides us to the next step. Just like Steve was talking about at Hot Breccia. We could talk about Hot Breccia. Should we release every hole one by one? I think that Steve and his team would be against that, right? Because that's trying to play to the stock market as opposed to just trying to get the right information internally that guides you to your next steps. And then when you have enough data, technical data, and you understand what you're looking at, and you think that that's meaningful for the market, then you put it out. Yeah, of course, if you get, the best hole ever drilled in Arizona, well, you put it out, your stock flies, you raise $50 million, and Bob's your uncle. But that's the exception rather than the norm.
Let's talk more about Hot Breccia, but firstly, I would like to state, so what's the current cash and working capital position like?
So it's at the moment, it's we're at let's say at a low in terms of historically where we've been in terms of cash, but we're okay because we don't have burn that's too high, and so as I was saying, we're focused now on raising the money, as I mentioned, and it's stated in the news release of the I think it was Monday, that it's a dual track. So we are talking to some of the large players in the area, and as our shareholders would expect us to do, right? So if we're not talking to our neighbors, then we're not doing our job, Steve and I. So we're talking. There is not a doubt in our mind that, technically speaking, it's a very attractive exploration project. It's reminiscent of the Resolution deposit that's owned by Rio Tinto and BHP just up the road, and so there's keen interest on the part of many people to get involved and get this thing drilled. And it with all of the circumstances in 2024, you get dealt the cards as you get dealt, and that's what happened. But the when we talk to people about Hot Breccia, we not only the enthusiasm of large players confirm our enthusiasm, which supports it, but it makes Steve and I even more motivated to get a drill on the property this year, and that's what we're going to do. And then just it's like the environment for copper in the U.S. just keeps on getting better. I'm not again political, but President Trump has a America First policy, and he demonstrated that this week by looking at copper that's being important, wanting to favor domestic production, and if you're going to augment the domestic production of copper in the U.S., well, you got to find new deposits. It's just as simple as that, right? So I think the macro environment for a project like ours internationally, slash prices is very favorable, and internally in the U.S., it's also very favorable. So if somebody's looking for an attractive exploration copper project in the world, we feel that the U.S. is the place to be, and we like the fundamentals of our project, and so I say to all of the shareholders, we're going to get this done. People can see my SETI report. I was a big buyer all of last year. I've bought, I think, all the way to the high, and so that I was convinced then that we were going to put a drill on the property. It's a little delayed, but I have the same conviction now that I ever had.
So, Dad, what are you looking to accomplish in your discussions with neighboring majors?
Well, I'll say a few words, and I'll turn it over to Steve, who has direct experiences in those things. I would say, Jasper, first of all, shareholders should expect companies like ours to look at all strategic options. in order to build shareholder value. We're in a particular district where it's very, you've got large mines. You have some of the largest mines in the world, not the largest, but some of the largest. Where we're located accounts for, I think, 2/3 of copper production in the U.S. When Resolution comes on stream, I think that alone will be about 25% of the production in the U.S. And so so our shareholders should expect that we're talking to everybody, and to what end? That's the $1 million question, right? So sometimes you talk and want to do something now, or you just want to put something on the table for later on. Having relationships with people I think is a good thing. Having multiple options is a good thing. But I'll turn it over to Steve, because he has real life experience of successfully talking to a number of majors, and then attracting a major that became a very large partner of the company he was involved in.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I agree with everything that Alain said. There are multiple reasons why you want to make sure that you establish relationships with all of these major players. And I was in the situation where in my previous employment, I was working on a project called Red Chris in northern British Columbia that is now a large mine that is operated by Newmont. And it's about to undergo a transition where it's going to become a significant block cave operation, one of the more significant ones in the world. Really, there's a lot of metal that's there that is going to be mined. And when we were going through the exploration of that project, we took it from being what everybody thought was another lousy little BC porphyry, and we proved it was a world-class giant. And that precipitated the conversation with a lot of major operators from around the world. And it really was a good experience for me, because not only do we, of course, they're interested in getting a toehold in the project, but we learn a lot from them and their experiences elsewhere. And I actually was able to go and tour projects all around the world that they were owning and operating that were similar to ours. And every time you do that, you learn things about their projects. It's much like being a lawyer and relying a lot on case law and experiences of other people to establish where your case is going to go. When you're a geologist, you want to go and take a look at the case law. You want to go and see the experiences that other people have had exploring and developing projects similar to the one that you've got, so that you can benefit from that experience going forward. And so it's always worthwhile taking the opportunity to build a relationship and establish a conversation with the majors, especially people that are in your backyard, so working in the same district and having experienced the same environmental, regulatory, community relations that you're going to be experiencing.
Would you be open for a joint venture on Hot Breccia?
Certainly an option that is available to us. I think that our first choice is to go out and be selfish and do the financing and keep as much of the control under our wing as possible. But that's a reality that we certainly know is there, and it's it's an option that we would. It might not be option A, but it's an option that we know we may want to pursue at some point.
I'll add, Jasper. So I think it's fair to say that at some point there'll be a major involved, right? So let's say, as Steve said, we're selfish. We want to give our shareholders the right of the Lassonde curve, make a discovery, the stock goes up. Given the economics of what's involved, everyone knows that there'll be a major involved at some point. I mean, if it's going to be a very deep-seated block cave operation, something that's reminiscent of Resolution, you're talking billions, right? So then the question becomes, well, when do you do it, right? So we'd rather not do it now. We know we're going to do it at some point in the future. The question for us is, when does that materialize? And in a perfect world, you have good relations with your neighbors. You have good relations with people who can then one day become a partner. and we go and we drill and find what we find, and we'll keep them interested in what we're doing now. And but it's too early to speculate on at what point would we want to involve a major. We'd rather do it ourselves for now.
So what's the road plan for securing 3 million Canadian dollars?
There are many options for that, Jasper. I'd rather not get into the specifics. I think again, everybody would say, well, we'd rather do it at a higher price. That's it goes without saying. So Steve and I are going to PDAC. We're talking to all sorts of sources of financing all the time, and we're working on a few things that we think that could help appreciate our stock price and firm it up. And at the right time, only at the right time and the right conditions would we pull the trigger on a financing. We only have 54 million shares outstanding. We understand dilution. We're respectful of our shareholders, and so let's just say we'll do it at the right time and when the conditions are right.
What dilution as a percentage would you be willing to stomach in the next race to see Hot Breccia get drilled?
You see, again, I like to use common sense, right? So if somebody comes in and says, I got $4 million, there are my terms, then just from a legal perspective, you have an obligation to consider. It doesn't mean you're going to do it. You're going to consider. So that's one thing. So you can be on the receiving end of things, and then you react. And then there's pursuing strategies to create the right environment to raise the money at the less dilutive possible price. But that's that's pure speculation, right? So as I said earlier, our preference is to pull the trigger at the right price, under the right circumstances, and at the right time with the right partners.
But so internally, how are you thinking around timing? I mean, you can't know for sure, but when would you like to? You say in 2025. As an investor, it would be good if you can add some more color to when you, at least to the latest, hope to have the money if it goes right.
Well, there's an overused phrase that the body's been there for what, 1 billion years, ain't going away, right? So I would say there's no one more keen to get a drill on the property than Steve and I. That's a given, right? And the rest of the team. So assume that we're the most impatient ones here, but we got to do it without blowing up our share structure. We got to do it with the right people. We've got a few things up our sleeves. As I said, we'd like to do it at a higher price if we can. We're not gamblers, we're not going to risk anything. And we're also on the receiving end because people know that the project is there. More and more people know it's there, and there's more and more interest for it. But why don't? So I Steve, I said you and I are the most impatient, possibly, or the keenest to go. So hopefully, I didn't misinterpret your position on the project.
I want to get drilling as soon as possible. I would say my answer to your question would be we want to do the financing as soon as possible, but we also have certain responsibilities to make sure that we do that diligently and take care of the shareholders, and we want to make sure that we do it in the least dilutive way possible, but we need to get it done. So it's a tight wire act that we have right now to walk the line and achieve that balance.
So where do you envision Prismo at the end of this year?
With some great drill holes out of Hot Breccia, the limits of your imagination could be pushed with where Prismo could be. And I'm not just being a promoter here, Jasper. This is realistic that Hot Breccia is the swinging for the fences type exploration play where it's hard to imagine what the upside potential could be. This is really, what I like to describe as big copper. We're in the district where big copper deposits are found. We're in a district where high grade copper deposits are found. We've got a lookalike analog that's 40 kilometers away that is one of the greatest discoveries in the history of our business. I mean, the upside is really quite tremendous for us, and that's why we want to make sure that we do this right.
I agree. I agree with Steve. We're going for sort of life-changing stuff here, right? It's and as I said, when I see the interest from, call it our neighbors, when I see the interest of people who are sophisticated geologists, technical people, and people ask, well, what if you don't find it? Well, we're going to find something. The question is, what are we going to find and at what stage, and how long does it take to really get a good gauge of what's there? We've all seen companies have one major drill hole and appreciate by a factor of 15 or plus, and that's really what we're after here at Hot Breccia.